Hi everyone.
Hi guys.
Welcome back. I'm sorry, this has really been a long time, hasn't it?
It's been a little bit of a while.
We've been away, we've been doing stuff.
Life got in the way a bit.
But look, we're back and we want to talk to you today about a few perfumes from a house that we've not mentioned a huge amount, have we? Dan has sort of championed one fragrance that you have in particular.
Yeah, so if you've watched our channel before, you've heard us talk about Pegwell Bay from the house
Very special.
of Haeckels. And now we're giving an overview of all of the fragrances they do.
Which is so exciting, isn't it? Because this thing, we've both sort of smelt this for a few years now.
Yeah.
And loved it. And I mean, you've owned it and loved it, but we've never tried any of the others.
So we're here to find out if the rest of the fragrances are as good.
Yes.
So I should say, the house of Haeckels, I discovered back in the mists of 2015. I just happened to be wandering around Margate, and there's a point just above a cliff where there's a kind of a Lido, and just above the cliff there was this old shop which I walked past, and it looked like a Victorian apothecary kind of.
Yeah.
It was it was a very dark shop, lots of dark kind of stained polished wood, and I kind of walked into to see what on earth it was, and realised it was this place which made seaweed and health and products, soaps and showers and things like that. So I went in to explore them and to try a few of their fragrances, one of which I particularly like, Pegwell Bay, which I eventually bought actually in what did I buy? Selfridges. I bought it in Selfridges. Yeah. Now it's available in lots of places. But I wanted to also find a bit more about the house. So it's the kind of brains and heart behind it is a guy called Dom Bridges.
And this isn't the actor, is it? There is an actor called Dom Bridges.
Is there?
I think so. I don't know if it's the same person.
I don't think it's him. But he has wanted to use seaweed. We live, the UK is an island surrounded by water, so we're surrounded by seaweed, and yet we don't use it at all. So he's used seaweed in a lot of his products, a lot of the skincare products, as well as the fragrances. Now, the fragrances themselves, they were just a set of GPS coordinates. Because he wanted to create these fragrances as a sort of olfactory snapshot of these locations, so that you could then go and explore the location and discover them.
Which is a great idea, isn't it?
Is a great idea.
I like that a lot.
But it's an absolute nightmare to memorise, because I said, it's not this really good fragrance, it's 31 by 60 by this really long number which I can never ever remember. They now have names of the locations.
Yeah, and by the, if someone's chatting you up, I don't know if this happens with perfume, and says, "What are you wearing?" By the time you're halfway through, they've left, and you've lost, and we don't do that.
But yeah, maybe some of the romance and mystery has disappeared because he's using the names, but it's much easier to remember what they're called. All of these locations are near Margate, near the shop. They're very close. I think they're within about 8 miles or something like that. And the other thing to say about the house is all of the materials, and I think that includes all the perfume materials, are within 20 miles of the shop in Margate. So that also includes, if you look at the bottles, which are really quite cool, including these funky little big heavy brass stoppers, all of that also comes from within 20 miles.
And the box?
And the box is all from within 20 miles. So
wow, that's great.
This is not your average fragrance house.
No. And I think it's, again, something that we occasionally mention. It's nice to champion a brand in this country, because there aren't many, are there? Yeah. There, a few people that we've loved over the years, but it's nice to have a sort of a local.
But only if the fragrances are good enough.
If they're good, absolutely.
But fortunately, they are. So let's start by the one, the bottle which I originally bought, and I fell in love with 4 years ago now. That's a very long time, and it still works its magic on me as it did 4 years ago.
I have to buy this. I still have to buy this.
When I first got it, it's because I wanted something which I thought I could wear in the summer as something which was fresh and uplifting, and it had citrusy, herbaceous elements, but it lasted all day, and it had depth and integrity and character.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love it. I love the fennel. I was saying to Joe earlier, I've got some wild fennel growing in my front garden, and this is obviously a big feature of this fragrance. I should also say all of these locations have descriptions on the Haeckels website, but as well as the description, they have beautiful videos.
Yeah.
Really, really beautiful videos. So what I'm going to do underneath is I'm going to put a link to all these videos. So as we are talking about them, I suggest you then watch these really, really beautiful videos.
Yeah. Get the samples and smell them while you watch the videos as well.
Amazing.
But that fennel is so fantastic, isn't it? And it sort of penetrates every layer somehow.
Yeah.
It's from top to bottom without being cloying or without obscuring the other notes that are in there. That lovely sort of slightly salty seaweed thing going on.
I just love it. It feels so herbaceous, so complex. It feels there's a kind of density as well.
Yeah.
As well as having this kind of bright, uplifting quality, there's a density and a richness. And I just love it. I love it as soon as the weather starts to get warmer in spring, I love wearing it. It's so comforting, it's so amazing.
You could put that on a cold winter's day and just be transported away, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
It's got that, it's not sort of light-hearted and frivolous in the sense of a little sparkly citrus.
No, and I think
there's a lot more going on.
I think transported is the word, as you'll see with a lot of these fragrances, they're about taking you to a place. They've all got personality, all got character. But Pegwell Bay, we've talked about this a lot, but if you're looking for something to wear in the warmer months, which has got plenty of character and integrity and is different, but not completely batshit crazy weird.
It's beautifully done, isn't it?
Yeah. So what about the rest of them? So we've been talking about Haeckels a bit. So they sent us these 7.5 ml bottles to give us a little chance to experience the rest of the house. So thank you for sending them. They are these travel-sized bottles, 7.5 ml. They didn't actually send us all of them. There were 2 which they didn't send. They sent us 5, and I wanted to try the whole house, so I then bought 2 of the others. So let's start with those 2 because they're actually really good. So this is St John's Cemetery. Now, we've both smelt them. I've spent a bit more time with them, so I'm going to give them to Joe, who has smelt them.
Yeah, I want to have a refresh.
I'm going to give you a little refresher, so you can sniff while I chat a bit.
But I will tell you, I was excited by all of them, and they all have personality straight away.
I mean, that has personality straight away. So the link for the video is down below. So St John's Cemetery is obviously a cemetery, and if you watch the video, it's an overgrown cemetery. There's lots of moss and ivy growing over all the gravestones, as well as lots and lots of pine trees. And
this very beautiful, slightly gothic feel.
Yeah, very
but without being dark.
They also include these really lovely postcards. I might include the photo. Each one comes with a postcode, which is a little visual snapshot. It's also quite useful for me to write notes about the fragrance on the back.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
It's really, I found the opening of this quite intense, almost kind of slightly medicinal.
Yeah, absolutely. And slightly dank and damp as well. There's a dampness to that.
Yeah. It's quite kind of austere, as opposed to Walpole Bay, which is very uplifting. This is quite moody and heavy. Yeah.
And it's a sort of seriousness of, we're walking through a graveyard, there has to be a certain decorum.
But it does smell...
But you can't help nature. Nature still grows around it.
I think it smells, you're exactly right, it smells like nature.
Yeah. It smells...
ivy...
It smells of all that stuff mixing in the air.
Yeah. And I said to you, I got this pine quality came through more and more, and eventually the fragrance which it started to remind me of, which I was initially surprised of, was Hinoki by Comme des Garçons, which is this Hinoki wood and pine growing by an onsen, a kind of outside Japanese spa.
I think this has a lot more natural beauty though. I think Hinoki has that certain lifted, not Isoi Super, but it has a certain lifted and we're going to project this wood at you at 100 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah.
This thing feels far more natural and evolving at its own pace. I mean, I imagine in an hour's time, all those edges will round. Yeah.
But it's already mossy, this mossy ivy greenness stays, I found.
Yeah.
It feels, if I were to suggest a kind of time of year, autumnal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moody, autumnal.
Absolutely.
The next one is Richborough. Let me show you the postcode. I might include the photo as well. So this is there's a site of an old Roman fort This is completely different.
Yeah.
To the last one. Let me give you a little spray.
I enjoyed this one, I have to say.
I really enjoyed this one.
Thank you very much.
So this,
yes.
for me, this takes you on a similar journey to Pegwell Bay, in that there's just a very natural herbaceousness. The thing which I get, you know, I'm not smelling the carb, but I get really, really, really big from here is this mintiness.
Yeah.
And we were discussing earlier other great mint fragrances like Geranium Pour Monsieur by Frederick Malle.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes how it feels that whilst those steer it in the kind of spearminty way, this feels somehow greener, and almost there's a bitterness to that.
Yeah. This is something like the accumulation of notes that add up to mintiness, rather than sort of starting out minty. Does that make sense?
But I find this so uplifting, and so refreshing.
Wonderful.
In the same way that, you know, if you wake up, you know, hungover or smelling of coffee, you brush your teeth to give yourself that minty kind of freshness.
Yeah.
I feel I do get this from this fragrance. And I said to you, I wore a few weeks ago, I was in lots of rehearsals, which was like quite hot and sweaty, and I loved wearing this fragrance to really kind of perk me up.
There's a lovely sort of brightness to it, but there's also a centre. I don't know if it's a phenol thing or an aniseed, but there is that relationship to Pegwell Bay.
Absolutely.
There is that sort of core to it.
Other thing with this,
very beautiful. Very.
The other things were, as it developed, there's also rose and chamomile.
Yeah.
And chamomile gives that very kind of chilled out feel. And I was saying to you, what this weirdly and surprisingly reminded me of was Oud Silk Mood by Francis Kitchen, which is, oud is in the title, but you don't really get any oud. You mostly get rose and chamomile.
Yeah.
And this reminded me of it, which I was surprised from a kind of a fresh, minty fragrance. But as well as
I do get that
as well as the uplifting mint, it's also got this very mellow, chilled chamomile.
And it feels, again, like, I think it feels like a fragrance that's all top and middle, but the base is going to come out later in a few hours. And I know that's how perfume works, but sometimes you have to be reminded of that.
But it lasted quite well, and this is a fragrance when I wore it, although it felt a little light as I sprayed. People around me did notice it and did comment.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful projection for sure.
Good fragrance. Right, next.
That's my favourite so far.
Is including Pegwell Bay?
No, Pegwell Bay, that's the grail for me.
So next is Reculver. So this is the site of a ruined abbey. Let me give you a little spray again. I've got to be careful with this because we have had a little accident in the organ loft, haven't we?
We've had a little spillage.
The first bottle of perfume we've ever broken in the organ loft. Anyway, moving on. This is another very uplifting one. So this is the site of a ruined abbey, which is covered by blackberries, raspberries, and sea lavender.
There's a beautiful naturalness to that.
Yeah.
And blackberries are still quite a rare thing to find in a fragrance.
Yeah. But there's a really kind of juicy kind of freshness.
Yeah. That actually takes me back to my grandmother's place in Cornwall, because we'd go out in the back garden and pick blackberries and things off the hedges, and there were nettles, and they would smell like blackberries in themselves, but there was so much green foliage around them that the whole experience was different. It was never just blackberries.
Yeah.
That's the environment of a blackberry rather than just a blackberry.
I think you're absolutely right. This really feels like a kind of a country walk, and you're walking through and experiencing this fruit and these things growing wild. There's also
a very gentle, smoky something.
Yeah, there's a little bit of incense to it, which gives a bit of sparkle. I don't know if that's there's a. I think if you read the full description, there's also reference to kind of other buildings around the fort which are kind of exposed to the sea and have been affected by the sea and the rain and the weather.
Yeah, and there's a certain saline aspect.
Yeah.
A certain sort of saltiness in the air, but without being overtly salty, like something like Selmaran, for instance.
I found I
prefer that even second time to first time.
Yeah, it's not always. Some people like to talk about performance, so I did find this didn't last quite as well as some of the others. I found it really uplifting, and I found it a nice one to reapply. But I did feel a lot of that beautiful initial fruit did disappear a little bit. It didn't last quite as well as Richborough or perhaps Pegwell Bay.
Which is a shame, because it is a really nice smell. I mean, it's beautifully done.
Next one is Botany Bay. Let me give you a spray. So this is an area of chalk cliffs.
This is the chalk one, yeah.
This is the kind of chalky one, and so it's supposed to capture the smell of the sea which has bashed against the chalk and the rain which has fallen on the chalk. And when I read that description, I expected iris, because we often associate iris with chalk, where that's not what you get at all. At all. I get kind of bergamot and lavender, mostly.
Yeah. Again, it's a very top note. I mean, it sounds so stupid to say, but it's a very top note dominated thing. You can tell that it's going to kind of hover in the area that it starts with, and it's not going to take you a million miles away from this. I think. Yeah, no, I did. I did. When I wore this, I did find this to be reasonably linear. But I did initially. We were just discussing this, and initially I didn't quite get the kind of chalk reference. No.
But after a while, I did. This feels like a kind of a scent memory. It doesn't feel. I'm discussing bergamot and lavender, but they're not a big punchy in your face.
No.
Version of those things. It feels like a memory, like I'm smelling something where bergamot and lavender have been.
It's sort of a fleeting thing. I do get a minerality.
Yeah, there's a minerality, a kind of ozonic quality, as if the sea breeze has just been washing those or carrying those fragrances away.
I can see it being quite an appealing, quite an addictive thing, because it's so subtle, it's so gently done.
It is, and
it kind of invites you to find things. You have to keep smelling. And
just going back to performance, I found, although this is quite modest in terms of sillage, it did last well.
Yeah.
And it did last a long time.
That's a nice idea.
Next one is one I liked.
What's
next one is Walpole Bay.
Ah, yes.
Here we go. Here. So this is a man-made pool. So by that means it means kind of within the kind of the coastal beach. I guess all beaches are coastal, aren't they? But anyway,
you would hope so. Apart from the shit ones.
Beach, so the outline of a pool has been created so that people can swim in the sea whilst there aren't any waves and they get swept out to sea.
It's just a safety.
Yeah. Which is this didn't smell kind of. You don't get that kind of that saline maritime film. I found this quite different. This is quite a punchy opening. This one lasted a long time and is one of the biggest and boldest I found.
And like I said to you, the first association I got with this was this metallic, slightly coppery thing going on that I found in. This is not what it smells like, but Secretion Magnifique. The weird metallic, or milky creaminess.
There's quite a lot of edge to it. I would have described it as kind of medicinal, but I know what you mean.
There's a creaminess binding that.
The words we're using maybe don't sound great, but
no, but honestly, I love it. I think it's fantastic. But don't take the Secretion Magnifique as
I think there's lavender and eucalyptus, which can give some of those kind of edgy, not acrid, because acrid kind of suggests burnt, but that really kind of edgy, kind of bitter quality.
And maybe it's just not as dry as some of the others in terms of the herbs. There's a sort of moistness to it.
It feels like, imagine if you got lavender, I don't know if you do this, but I do this a lot with herbs and even with flowers, when you pick them, and then you kind of rub them in between your hands, and then you smell it like that. With the heat of your hand, it seems to amplify the fragrance, the natural fragrance of the herb. And that's what I feel like with this. I wore this, and I bumped into a friend who's also kind of a bit of a fraghead, and I gave him a hug, and he said, "Oh God, what's that? What are you wearing? It smells really, really fresh and green." And this is also a galbanum in it, which I think kind of plays on that kind of bitterness you were talking about.
Yeah,
it makes it even more green. And it's, in a way, this is a slightly unusual fragrance.
Yeah, I think of all of these so far, this is the most unusual.
Yeah.
This is the most.
I really like this. I
alien,
really
yeah.
liked wearing it. Really interesting. Really natural for
Olive oil?
I don't know if that's just eucalyptus gives that kind of olive oil like. There's a
little
savoury quality.
Yeah.
Definitely a savoury quality. Salady. Yeah, I know you. I can imagine
just
on a herby salad.
Yeah. Or is it those grissini, the breadsticks with rosemary or something on them? I really like that a lot.
It's good. Walpole Bay.
Wow.
I really like that one. Another one.
See, I would have
Do you want
expected
to
that.
hold up the card while I spray?
Yes. So here we are.
So this is now.
I mean, that looks like primary jungle in Bolivia.
This is the location which is furthest inland. And
So which place is this? Blean Woods.
this is Blean Woods. This is furthest inland, and it is the. There's a big orchard, a crab.
No, this is called Blean Woods.
This is called Blean Woods.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it's very charming.
yeah, so this
Very charming.
This is. I thought the first smell of this smelled like brandy. I got a big hit of apples.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the way it somehow combined with the just
I'm
initial
getting it
alcohol.
now.
Yeah.
I'm getting a sort of cherry thing, like a slightly boozy cherry liqueur
Yeah,
thing. But the apple, absolutely. I'd totally buy that.
Yeah.
As if you've poached them in some
got a hint
Calvados or
A
something.
hint of rose in this, and I sometimes find this with apple notes or apple accords. I don't know that perhaps they are apple accords which are built on rose, but I get a kind of slight kind of rose association.
Yeah.
I like this.
There's a
But
lovely brightness.
you get that kind of sharpness of biting into a crab apple. You know,
Yeah.
kind of like catching it kind of the
Absolutely.
back of your throat. And already there's a woodiness which suggests, it evokes this woody scene.
Yeah, it's like a very gentle, woodsy, like not incense, but something quite sparkly. There's something that lifts it a little bit. Slight sweetness, but it never ever veers into gourmand territory, I think.
When I wore this, I got a slight birchy, almost slightly dirty quality which came into it.
Yeah, see, I mean,
birch.
with trying these on card, on
Yeah.
skin, these are going to be. I think these are all going to pop. That's a very American thing to say, but I think they're all going to really take on a lot more personality. They already have huge personalities. I really like that a lot.
Quite
Yeah,
different to the rest. The last one.
quite modern.
The last one. So this is strangely one of the reasons I visited Margate for the first time. Margate was a big Victorian seaside resort, I suppose. One of the first places. And if you go there were these grand Victorian hotels, which are now slightly faded. There's a definite feel of faded grandeur to Margate, and it is the site of one of the oldest amusement parks in the world. So in the 1880s, I think Dreamland opened.
I need to check it out.
And it's closed and opened a few times, and it reopened in 2015, which is when I went. And they've tried to rebuild it as a Victorian theme park. So it's all the rides are wood, and there's also a kind of memorial rose garden in the middle of it, which I don't think you would get in a modern
Alton Towers. Yes.
So this is inspired by all of those wooden constructions and the fact that there's been some arson and some of them have burnt down. And the other thing is lots of rose.
Yeah. Now this one I really loved as well. Oh, it just makes me feel happy.
Yeah, definitely the first
smell.
thing. The first thing I get as I smell that from here is a lot of rose, a big, and it's kind of a dusty rose. It's not jammy, kind of fruity. It's definitely more dusty.
It's rose through a veil, maybe through a veil of dust and other smells that are going on.
And already I get kind of a woodiness and a kind of patchouli. I compared it. Compared's not the right word, but I mentioned a Tom Ford Noir de Noir, which has got rose and patchouli, but that's not a direct comparison because Noir de Noir is very jammy, whereas this is not jammy. This is much more dry. Kind of.
It sort of fits all of them, doesn't it? They're all quite heady and they're all quite lifted and bright and elegant. None of these are sort of ramming home.
I mean, this is the kind of darkest of them all, I would say, because you do get that kind of woodiness, and eventually you get a kind of slightly burnt woodiness, which I think is maybe achieved through rosemary as opposed to being cade oil or something like that.
I love that. Again, I said to you earlier, didn't I? I get this slight lemonade thing, like that traditional cloudy lemonade.
I know what you mean. There's a kind of like a fissiness to it.
Something effervescent and sparkling.
I was initially surprised when
Very beautiful.
Before I read the description, I saw Dreamland and thought this is supposed to smell like an amusement park. It doesn't. But now I think of this wood which has been burnt, and this rose garden in the middle of it. I can really picture that.
And what did the amusement park smell like when it was opened? You know, we didn't have any of the stuff that we have now, like the sort of candy floss machines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very different time.
Hot dog stands, all that kind of jazz.
So all of these fragrances,
nice.
I feel they've got bags of personality. I also really recommend, if you haven't already done so, to come and watch some of the videos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you really get, it really kind of transports you in the whole aesthetic of the company. I really admire.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Enormously. If you want fragrances which smell natural, smell unlike what the next person on the tube or the train's going to be wearing, have bags of personality.
Yeah, these are the way to go.
Have lots of integrity. Just to mention a few things about price. So a whole bottle is 160ml, which are one of these bottles, which comes in a great big wooden box as well.
160 pounds.
160 pounds, yeah. Or you can buy a 7.5ml, which is one of these travel sprays. One of these. They cost £15, and they also do a kind of a box set, which is the GPS Explorer, which is 5 of these bottles for £45. So that's a really good way. They also do some smaller samples as well. But I mean, for £45,
these things last you a while.
It's a good way of getting to know the house. I'm a big fan of them. Now, when we started exploring, we were looking for something which compared to, or maybe even surpassed, Pegwell Bay. So what do you think? What are your favourites? I know which mine are. I'll let you go first.
Pegwell Bay is still my favourite. Then Richborough. And I think Dreamland, actually.
I liked Dreamland. I really liked Walpole Bay. I found...
Yeah.
Especially when I wore it, it's quite unusual really, and I found the galbanum, when I wore it on my skin, came up more and more, and it felt very fresh and very green and very unique, and I don't own that many galbanum.
It is really unique, isn't it?
So I really liked Walpole Bay. I really loved Richborough.
Yeah.
Really loved that.
I mean, I think that, for me, it feels like it's the DNA of Haeckels.
Yeah, it has got a lot of...
same DNA.
But I mean, just smell that mint, it's... For me...
Very, very beautiful.
I mean, what's the État de Libre d'Orange mint? You or someone like you? Is it?
I can't remember.
Anyway, I'll mention it down here. But that's a kind of great mint, kind of mojito-y one. There are a few good mint fragrances, and I really love Geranium Pour Monsieur by Frédéric Malle, by Dominique Ropion. But I think I prefer this as a mint fragrance.
I prefer that. I think it just has a lot more personality. It doesn't feel like a sort of a one-note.
And it doesn't quite go in the toothpaste territory here. It feels more like natural mint than toothpaste.
Absolutely.
I love it. But if I'm completely honest, my favourite is still Pegwell Bay, which I love. And how much have I used? About just over half. I will keep buying this. I will keep buying it and buying it.
We're going to go to Margate soon, aren't we, at some point? Yeah. And I think I need to get a bottle of that, even though the weather's going to be shit for the next however many months. Yeah. That thing transports me away 1,000 miles.
It's amazing.
You don't need to go on holiday if you own that. Yeah. You really don't.
It's beautiful. So,
I mean, great, all of them.
Yeah. If you've
not
tried,
one of these, I don't know.
Because the other thing which kind of spurred us on to do this video. Some people had commented and said, "Oh, you should really try Richborough. You should really try Dreamland." And so we're really now glad that we tried some of these. Yeah. And they have got quite a lot of personality. So I can imagine that different people are going to enjoy different ones. So rather than blind buying a bottle, except if it's Pegwell Bay, blind buying. But the others, I think you're better trying to get a little either the Explorer pack or even the smaller samples. So if you have tried them,
tell us what you think.
Tell us what you think.
And also, I mean, just another thing to throw in. Trying these gives you a really good overview of the house, which I think is important, not to handpick and say, I like that one, I'm not keen on that one. They're all related somehow, and there's a sort of organic connection between all of these.
Yeah. So, if you have tried any of these other Haeckels and you've loved them, or even if you hate them,
yeah, it's interesting to get another viewpoint on these, isn't it?
Or if you, the other thing is, if there are any houses which are similar to this, which if we enjoy this as we have, we should explore.
Yes.
Let us know as well. But until next time, happy sniffing.